couple of months, quite a lot has been happening as the federal government, through the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, has been working on developing the National Homegrown School Feeding Program into a very efficient intervention. Only last week, it held another 2-day joint consultation which aims to increase the quality of food given to public school students as well as their enrollment. Our program this week will emphasize some of the points raised at this meeting. Away from the school feeding program, we shall take you to Ogun State, where another component of the National Social Investment Program is doing well to improve the lives of Nigerians. This time, it is the Conditional Cash Transfer initiative we shall be looking at. All of this plus news of recent events in this episode of the program Service to Humanity. My name is Habiba Zakzak, urging you to please stay tuned for more on the program after the break.
And is key to helping young Nigerians acquire and develop.
The federal government of Nigeria remains committed to including and protecting persons with disabilities to guarantee that no one is left behind.
I see that we are going through challenging times, and I see this woman running all about the country trying to help our people, because this lady is doing a very good job for our country.
Thank you.
Thank you for all what you have been doing for us.
The program starts with the Management Diary, where we bring you news from the ministry and her agencies. In the news, Osinbajo assures international community on recovery of Lake Chad region. And bill to establish National Social Investment Coordinating Office passes third reading. Stay tuned for details.
Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has assured the international community of the commitment of current administration to effectively participate in the implementation of policies that will help rebuild the Lake Chad region. Professor Osinbajo gave the assurance during his keynote address at the inaugural Forum on the Development of the Lake Chad Basin, which took place in Abuja. While praising the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development Hajia Sadia Umar Farouk, the Northeast Development Commission, the Lake Chad Basin Commission, and other stakeholders for their commitment and contributions to the recovery of the Lake Chad region, the Vice President advised that the forum's results or recommendations be sent to the various governments to guide policy making and strategic positions that will be taken in the future. Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Hajia Sadia Umar Farouk, who was represented by the former Permanent Secretary of the Ministry, Bashir Noura Al-Ali, stated that the Boko Haram insurgency had displaced an estimated 23 million inhabitants across the 4 nations bordering the Lake Chad Basin in the last 10 years. The minister further stated that the goal of the inaugural forum is to capitalize on the gains and successes of the Nigerian Armed Forces, the Multinational Joint Task Force (NHGSFP), and militaries from all LCB countries' military operations. A bill which seeks to establish the National Social Investment Program (NSIP) has passed third reading in the House of Representatives. The bill, which is to provide a legal framework for the establishment of the National Social Investment Program for the assistance and empowerment of poor and vulnerable Nigerians, will also provide for the establishment of the NSIP Coordinating Office within the federal ministry responsible for social development to manage the implementation of the program. The NSIP bill is to regulate the various programs like the National Social Register, National Beneficiaries Register, Conditional Cash Transfer, National Homegrown School Feeding Program, Empower Program, Government Enterprise and Empowerment Program, as well as such other social investment programs as may be approved by the President. According to the bill, the funding for the NSIP program shall be drawn from counterpart contribution from the federal, state and local governments' donations from individuals, companies, government institutions, bilateral or multilateral organizations, and development partners, amongst other sources like VAT, recovered assets and repatriated funds.
Welcome back. The Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development is building capacity towards improving the efficiency of the National Homegrown School Feeding Program while enriching the quality of food served to pupils of public primary schools. Since the beginning of this year, quite a number of workshops and consultative meetings have taken place towards meeting this objective. In our next segment, we shall take a look at some of the meetings held, focusing on the recent event to develop an inclusive policy on the National Homegrown School Feeding Program with support from the World Food Programme. Please stay tuned.
The National Homegrown School Feeding Program has generated quite a lot of interest locally and internationally. This is not unconnected to the fact that the program has become a huge success in achieving its set goals of increasing school enrollment, boosting nutrition of pupils, as well as boosting economic activities towards fighting poverty.
So the school feeding program gives them an edge and gives them a starting point.
Towards making it more efficient, quite a number of stakeholder meetings have been mounted. In February 2022, a two-day national consultative meeting on public food procurement in the context of Nigeria's National Homegrown School Feeding Program was organized in collaboration with Resolve to Save Lives. The consultative meeting was aimed at putting together the implementing team of the National Homegrown School Feeding Program in the country to discuss the issues of food procurement.
This particular consultative meeting on public food procurement and many other issues that you will discuss is just to add value to what you know already. And I hope if we continue at this pace, we will quietly put NSIP as the major legacy of Mr. President. We don't have time, but it can be done.
In March, the ministry, in partnership with Japan International Cooperation Agency (JICA) and Auda NEPAD, also organized a two-day capacity building workshop to share Nigeria's good lessons and best practices on the implementation of Homegrown School Feeding Program, as well as roll out the Homegrown School Feeding Guidelines while assessing the operational challenges of using the guide. Towards the end of March, the ministry then organized a one-day validation meeting of the nutrition guideline of the National Homegrown School Feeding Program.
This is the National Homegrown School Feeding Program dashboard. I'm trying to let you see.
At the meeting were representatives of the National Social Investment Program (NSIP), the Nutrition Society of Nigeria (NSN), as well as the World Food Programme (WFP), states program managers of the National Homegrown School Feeding Program, and other stakeholders. The objective of the meeting was to authenticate the nutrition guideline of the school feeding program with the intention of boosting nutrition of food served to primaries 1 to 3 pupils of public schools under the program.
An adjustment of the flat rate.
Building on these events, a two-day joint policy consultation on the National Homegrown School Feeding Program held on the 11th and 12th of April 2022. The policy states that government at federal, state and local levels will closely collaborate across levels of government and sectors, as well as communities, to ensure that school feeding is designed, planned, resourced, implemented, monitored, and reported on in a reliable, continuous, high-quality, result-oriented, transparent, and accountable manner. Team lead of the school feeding program, Aisha Tudugil, set the ball rolling with her remarks on the school feeding program as it relates to the program managers and officers.
I've been hearing a lot during the conversations that this is federal government school feeding, federal government program. Actually, it's a national program, and it's very deliberate why it's national. Because if this was a federal government program, I think we would have more control on the procurement. We would just do our procurement process and select people and send them to you in the states. We would take control of the targeting and select your books and tell you these are the people that we're going to be working with. But in the spirit of how it was designed to be a national program, everybody has his or her own responsibility, or the various structures of government have their own responsibilities, and it is not arbitrary. It was not just assigned like that. There are already preceding factors that made it so.
Dugil further mentions plans in the pipeline to solidify the implementation of the policy, as she calls on the project managers and officers for their support.
Once we start, we're going to have more consultations with you, engagements, interface. We're going to also talk to find a way to speak with the governors, of course, through our honorable minister, through the various other lobbying groups that may exist. Talk to other stakeholders that somehow we've not brought in, but we've heard about, like the first ladies. They're very powerful. We have to find a way to bring them in. They really are. You know, more of the private sector to be involved, especially when we're looking at alternative resourcing. This is the time for people to actually come in and contribute. So we're going to see that happen, and we're going to get a lot of guidance, because we also don't want to lead the charge alone. So when it's the turn of your state to engage with the stakeholders, of course we will provide as much guidance as you need to make sure that you bring in the relevant people in your state. The local government must have a voice. The communities must have a voice, because it works out for you and me and everybody that is an administrator on this program if the communities understand why it is so important. And this is a way to get them to see why it's important, even from the start.
Peter Haag from the United Nations World Food Programme facilitated this two-day event.
It doesn't really make a lot of sense that every state has to simply adopt the federal law or the federal policy. But the policy is going to be designed in a way that it leaves a lot of space. So when the states then say, okay, what should this program really look like in our state, they don't have to change the policy. They can take the policy exactly as it is, use its standards, use the framework, but then fill that framework with saying, okay, the policy says we should involve the local farmers, the cooks should have benefits, we should be as efficient as possible. So in our state, the procurement model will look like this. We are going to use cooks cooperatives and farmers cooperatives, and for one or two things we are going to use aggregators because it doesn't work otherwise. And that is one solution.
Haag describes how the policy should function in the various states and local governments.
The policy should be exactly that. It should already be discussed with everybody, and people should like it at different levels because it gives them still a lot of freedom to actually design the program in its real shape in the end, so it fits to their needs and their preferences.
According to the policy, the federal government has the power to come up with policies, design the objectives of the program, set standards of the program, draw up criteria for the program, and results framework. The policy also seeks to empower state governments to design menus, coordinate procurement, design implementation structure, and coordinate activities of the program. And the local government, communities are given the power to design menus, carry out procurement, and implementation. Participants also made suggestions and contributions.
Usually in policies, when federal government brings policy, the state are supposed to domesticate. For example, in other policies like the gender policy, the state domesticated and even some local government contextualized it. So design of anything that comes from federal government, it is responsibility of the state to do the needful. Federal government will not come and impose it, but it is up to the state to be ready.
We have so many peculiarities, but because of the size of the country. To the extent that even within a local government, there are peculiarities within the wards and the communities. In my own community, we supply yam to many states in Nigeria. I think the design, at the end of the day, though it is starting from federal, it will have to go back and come back to federal in order to finish this design. because the communities must make their inputs into what becomes a federal design.
I know that the federal government did a lot to provide a soft landing for the program to start in states at that time. Many states may not be able to meet up the conditions, but if you do not, you don't start. You must do the basics, preparatory ground for you to take off from the program. How can you start it without an office?
Participants were also broken into groups where they held discussions on strategic framework of the program, the roles of federal and state governments, menu planning and nutrition guidelines. At the closing of the meeting, team leader of the school feeding program, Aisha Tudugil, thanked the United Nations World Food Programme for its support and the participants for their commitment.
I want to thank you all for your participation, for the spirited conversations. It's coming from a place of love, I know, because everybody here is in one way or the other, directly or indirectly, working on the school feeding program. So thank you so much for bringing your knowledge to fore. Thank you so much for sharing all that you do. I think we've all experienced great learning, things that we didn't know about the program in the various states. So this has been so useful.
Across the 6 geopolitical zones.
They should use this money for what it is meant for, efficiently to take care of their family.
In 36 states and the FCT. Over 6.4 million of Nigerians poorest of the poor in about 1.3 million households receive conditional cash transfers of 5,000 naira monthly under the Household Upliftment Program of the federal government. Their joy knows no bound.
And the government very well because they did well for us.
It's helped me to do any other thing, my family.
Reducing absolute poverty, promoting shared prosperity through the Conditional Cash Transfer Initiative. The Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development in service to humanity.
You are watching Service to Humanity, a program that brings to you events and activities from the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development as it fulfills its mission. The National Social Investment Programs are social welfare initiatives launched by Nigeria's federal government in 2015 under the guidance of the National Social Investment Office to ensure a more fair allocation of resources to vulnerable groups such as children, youth, and women. One of these welfare initiatives is the Conditional Cash Transfer, CCT, and our team traveled to Ogun State, where we met with the head of unit for Ogun State, CCT, as well as some CCT beneficiaries. Let's hear how the CCT has impacted lives and changed livelihoods.
The Conditional Cash Transfer, CCT program is designed to benefit poor and vulnerable households with a monthly stipend of 5,000 naira. Beneficiaries also receive training as well as financial and technical support to start small businesses under the CCT. Ogun State is one of the states where the implementation of the program started last year. Commissioner for Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs of the state, Femi Ogumbawo, speaks on the CCT program in the state.
The federal people that are being paid, you may be saying how much is 5,000, but 5,000 is a lot to some people.
Rotimi Olu Akileshe, Permanent Secretary, Ministry, Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs of the state, also speaks on the program.
It has added value to lives. The program came about from the presidency in order to lift people out of poverty. That's the intention. And clearly, quite a large number of people have been able to benefit from this inspiration of the government.
The Ogun State CCT unit head, Fumi Baker, shares with us the journey so far on the Conditional Cash Transfer program in the state.
Initially, we were given 10,456 households to capture. but we were not able to meet all the 10,456 households. We were only able to capture 9,593 households because when the enumeration was done, it was during the lockdown. A lot of people traveled from wherever they were to their hometown, to their villages. So immediately after the lockdown, they went back to where they came from. And such people have been enumerated. So we couldn't meet some of them. So that's why we were only able to capture 9,593 households. So it's the 9,593 households that were issued ID cards for, and they were the ones we gave the ID cards to. So during the disbursement, we didn't see all of them. We had to go to their communities. The payment was done based on community basis.
Baker also speaks on the impact of the Conditional Cash Transfer program on beneficiaries from Ogun State.
There is this woman that said her shop was burgled. The thieves went away with all the items she sells. But with the 10,000 naira, she was able to start her business back, and she's making progress. That is a success story. There's another group of people that one particular woman, she said she didn't know what to do. She did not have any business. But after they gave her the 10,000 naira, she went into mat making, and she started weaving mats and selling, and she is progressing. I think about 2 of them went into mat processing. Some people added the money to their palm oil business. Some people somebody said she was doing this local gin. She started doing local gin with the 10,000 naira. So it really made a great impact in the lives of these beneficiaries. And it's not only in Ikokia local government that we have such success stories. Even in some other local governments, they added the money to their businesses, and they are they're having profits, and they are turning the money over to better their lives.
Mariam Swaga, a fufu maker and a beneficiary of the CCT program, tells us how the CCT program has impacted her life.
The program has really impacted on my life. I made profits through production of gari. I can now package and process gari into fufu for sale. I have really gained a lot because I can now provide food for my children and at the same time run my business smoothly.
Mary Michael is a cassava processor and another beneficiary of the CCT program. She also has a story to tell on how the program has impacted her life.
Before I got this money, I used to borrow money from other loan institutions. Ever since I received the money, I now buy and resell gari, and I can now provide for my family.
Fatima Akande, a gari maker, and Sherifat Adebowale, a cassava processor, also speak on the CCT program and how it has benefited them.
I am very grateful for this program because my business is moving well. When I received the money, I ventured into processing cassava to produce gari. Aside that, I do other businesses and I can now pay my children's school fees. As I speak now, some of my children are in private schools while others are at tertiary level. It has really impacted on my life.
I am grateful because I use the money for business and also take care of my children. It has really changed my life because feeding my family is no longer difficult. I can now pay my children's school fees without stress.
That concludes this week's episode of Service to Humanity. Questions, comments, and recommendations can be sent to the ministry via any of the social media outlets, including Facebook and Twitter. You can also send text only to any of the numbers displayed on your screen, and we will do our utmost best to route it to the appropriate authorities. In the meantime, have a great evening and see you next week.